Hi guys, in this video I will be talking about the image component, which is responsible, as you might have guessed, for displaying images. The component is rather dynamic because you can control the actual image that needs to be displayed dynamically through data binding. Alternatively, you can specify a static image that will be displayed in your application. To demonstrate the image component, I have put together a sample application that I would like to run first, and then we will go through to see how it is implemented so you can get a feel for how the image component works. Let me run it first. In this application, I display contents of a data table, which is my users table, and when I click on a user, the image associated with that user object is displayed in the image component. The data structure for this data table, and I will review it shortly, is very simple, just the standard users object, but it also has a column which is a link to an image associated with a specific user. So as you can see, the application is very simple and it's enriched with the image to display for a user. Let's take a look at the backend structure first. In here, if I go to my database, in the users table, these are the users. As you can see, there is a column that is called photo, and the data type of that column is file reference. The file reference contains URLs to the images stored in Backendless file storage. You do not have to use file reference. You could easily use a data column that is a string and in there store the URL itself. The benefit of having it as the file reference is because whenever you want to assign an image using Backendless console, you can just click on the link right here in this little icon, and then the file storage opens up where you can browse to a file. In this case, these are going to be images, and then select the file that will be associated with that object, in this case the user object. So there is some flexibility there. You do not have to use, once again, file reference. You can just use string but then store the URLs. Let's go back to the UI builder and see how this application is designed from the UI perspective. In here, the structure is very simple. I do have a container that contains two cells. This is cell 1. It contains the data table. The width of that cell is 7/12. And then there is a second cell that contains my image, and the width is 5/12. The width is not that important. This way, with the assignment of 7/12 and 5/12 between these two cells, you can see that the data table has a little bit of a larger horizontal space. Inside of these cells, I put in a block, and then this is a little trick. By putting a block, I can ensure that the data table and the image, it uses the same technique, never go out above the vertical space allocated to the page. So in here with the data table, I map it to the users table, so it automatically pulls in all the data. And then the image here, it has data binding. If I go to the logic for the image, you can see in the data binding, there is a source URL logic, and then it's bound to a property user photo. In data table, if we go to the logic of the data table, you see that there is an on record selected logic. And in here, on record selected, it is invoked every time when you select a record in the data table. And in here, the selected record is going to be a specific user object. So from that user object, I get the property photo because that's the name of the column in the database. And whatever the value that is contained in here, I set it in page data for user photo. And user photo is the name of the property that the actual image is bound to. So this way, the image through data binding gets the actual URL. And for the image now, let's go there. When the source URL logic is triggered, it automatically loads that image, or attempts to load that image that comes to it through data binding. And as a result, the effect is exactly what you see in this application. The image is automatically retrieved by the image component. So the mechanics of it is very straightforward if you want to make it dynamic behavior. If you want to set it statically, just use this URL input and then click on 3 dots, select the image that you want to use, or you can just paste the image URL in this text box right here. As far as the dimensions, it's fairly standard setup where you can configure margins and you can configure width and height and just various width and height related properties. Additionally, you can also configure align self, which comes from the flex box. And then in the decorations, you can configure the opacity of the image. So very easy to use, very straightforward set of settings that we provide for the image component. Let's also take a look at some of the events that exist in logic for image. And in here, there is a on click. So when someone clicks on that image, you can execute some logic to do whatever. Also on mouse over, on mouse out, you can add your logic. On visibility change is triggered whenever the visibility of the image changes. Like if you make it invisible or visible, you can attach some additional logic to that. On load event is triggered whenever that image is being loaded. And then here I added this little print block, which just outputs to console the text that it is an on load event. If the image fails to load, then on air event is triggered. And there are two data bindable properties, visibility logic and source URL logic, which we are using here. And visibility logic allows you to control visibility in the logic, or bind it to a property that will control whether that image is visible or not through data binding. So as you can see, also very straightforward set of logical elements that you can attach to your images. And that's pretty much it. There's, as I said, it's very straightforward. There is not a lot to it. You can have as many image components as you want to put it on your page. In the next lecture, we will review how to use the image component to build a image gallery, which is sort of a variation of the use case that we are reviewing here. So in the next lecture, the actual images will be coming from the file storage, not necessarily attached to an object as we have done in this app. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. And as always, happy godless coding.